In the bustling town of Umuchi, surrounded by dense forests whispered to be home to spirits, lived a young woman named Amara. She was known for her vibrant energy and insatiable curiosity. Raised by parents who were always too busy with their careers, Amara and her siblings grew up relying on street food and fast meals. By the time she was old enough to fend for herself, cooking was a skill she never bothered to learn. Instead, she made it her mission to try every new restaurant that popped up in town. Her friend Gozi, a careful and practical woman, constantly warned Amara about her eating habits. "Amara, you can't trust these places. You have no idea how they prepare their food. One of these days you'll regret it," she would often say. But Amara would just laugh it off, teasing Gozi for being overly cautious. "You worry too much. Life's too short to miss out on good food," she would reply, waving off her friend's concerns. One evening, after an exhausting day at work, Amara was on her way home when something caught her eye. A new restaurant had opened on the corner of Ekweme Street, its sign glowing faintly in the twilight, "The Midnight Feast, open for the bold." It was unlike any place she had ever seen. The building was draped in thick velvet curtains, with lanterns casting an amber glow that beckoned her closer. Despite Ngozi's warnings ringing in the back of her mind, Amara couldn't resist. "It's just one meal," she told herself, stepping through the ornate doors. Inside, the restaurant was even more mesmerizing. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting feasts from different cultures, the tables covered with embroidered cloths, and chandeliers made of intricately twisted metal hung from the ceiling. The air was thick with the rich aroma of spices she couldn't quite place, a mix of sweet and savory that made her mouth water. A tall, regal woman with piercing eyes approached her. "Welcome to the Midnight Feast. I am Madame Ifeoma. You are in for a treat tonight," she said with a smile that sent a shiver down Amara's spine. The other diners, dressed in opulent clothing, ate in silence, their faces obscured by the dim lighting. Amara was led to a corner table, where a menu filled with exotic dishes awaited her. Each item sounded more luxurious than the last, and her excitement grew with every page she turned. When her meal arrived, it was unlike anything she had ever tasted. The flavors exploded in her mouth, each bite more decadent than the last. But as she ate, she noticed something strange. The other diners moved in slow, deliberate motions, their eyes unfocused and glazed. Their expressions were vacant, as if they were entranced by something unseen. Every so often, she thought she heard whispers coming from the shadows, a soft chant that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. But whenever she turned to look, the room fell silent. About halfway through her meal, Amara felt a sudden, urgent need to use the restroom. She asked one of the waiters for directions and was led down a dimly lit corridor. As she walked, the air grew colder, the lights flickering as if struggling to stay alive. The restroom was occupied, and as she waited, she noticed a door slightly ajar with a sign that read, "Staff Only." A strange compulsion came over her, and she pushed the door open. The moment she stepped into the kitchen, the illusion shattered. The pristine elegance of the dining area was a lie. The kitchen was a nightmare of filth and decay. Dirty pots bubbled with unidentifiable sludge, and half-cooked meats were left out to rot, covered in flies. The floor was sticky with grime, and a foul stench filled the air, so thick it made her gag. The chefs, who had appeared so refined from the dining room, were disheveled and filthy, their clothes stained with old food and sweat. In the corner, she saw Madame Ifeoma, no longer the elegant hostess, but a hunched figure stirring a massive cauldron. Her eyes were wild, her hands moving with unnatural speed. As Amara watched, she saw something that turned her stomach, a severed human hand floating among the herbs in the pot. Amara clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream as her knees went weak. The other cooks chanted in a low, guttural language, their voices weaving into the air like a dark spell. Backing away slowly, Amara bumped into a shelf, knocking over a stack of plates. The noise was deafening in the otherwise quiet kitchen. Madame Ifeoma's head snapped towards her, eyes blazing with a fury that seemed inhuman. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice a mix of many voices, echoing unnaturally in the small space. Amara turned and bolted, her heart pounding in her chest. She ran down the corridor, the walls seeming to close in on her as she fled. But the restaurant seemed to shift and change. the hallway stretching longer and longer, as if it were trying to trap her inside. Just as she felt the darkness closing in, she saw the front door and threw herself through it, stumbling into the cold night air. Panting and shaking, Amara looked back, expecting to see the restaurant looming behind her. But, to her horror, it was gone. The building had vanished, replaced by an old abandoned lot covered in weeds. Confused and terrified, she ran all the way back home. When she burst through the door of her apartment, Ngozi was there waiting for her. "Amara, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." Amara, still trembling, recounted the night's events, tears streaming down her face. Ngozi listened in stunned silence. "I warned you, Amara. Not everything that looks good is safe," she said softly. The experience left Amara shaken, but old habits die hard. Within a week, she found herself drawn back to her usual routine, unable to resist the lure of street food. But the moment she bit into a dish from one of her favorite vendors, she was overcome with nausea. It was as if her body was rejecting anything that wasn't made with her own hands. Determined to break free from the curse she believed she had brought upon herself, Amara reluctantly let Ngozi teach her how to cook. They spent the next few weeks together in the kitchen, Ngozi guiding her through each recipe. At first, Amara struggled, burning pots and overcooking rice, but slowly she improved. She found a strange comfort in the rhythm of chopping vegetables, the sizzle of onions in hot oil, and the aroma of fresh herbs filling her small kitchen. One night, as they were cleaning up after dinner, a soft knock echoed from the front door. Amara's blood ran cold. Ngozi went to answer it, but there was no one there. Only a faint whisper lingered in the air, carried by the wind. "You escaped once, but the midnight feast is always hungry." Amara slammed the door shut, her hands shaking. She realized then that her battle wasn't over. Whatever dark forces haunted that cursed restaurant had marked her, and they wouldn't stop until they claimed what was theirs. From that day on, Amara became a recluse, refusing to eat anything she didn't prepare herself. She carried charms and amulets, prayed over every meal, and never ventured out after dark. But every so often, she would catch a whiff of that intoxicating aroma, the one that lured her into the midnight feast, and she knew that one day she might not be able to resist its call again.